All right. It's 3 minutes after. We got a couple people in here. Let's go. So this is the first of its kind that we're doing right now is a Rainmaker live question and answer session. So some of you have already sent in, uh, and I'm speaking both to the people that are here now and the people that will see this recorded. Some of you sent in questions. Some of you haven't, but if you drop into the chat and you have anything to say, welcome to. And if as questions come up, if you have insight, something that you've done with your own site, with your own marketing, anything like that, that you feel like you can help that person with, drop it in the chat. We'll have conversations going, both with me talking and then also over here in the chat. So yeah, let's get right to it. So as far as questions that we got before the session, there were several that we got that were reiterated over and over and over again. Our very basic common email questions. So we have from Karishma. Please tell me I'm not mispronouncing that. How often should you send emails? Sending emails is like everything else in marketing. There's a combination of art and science to it. There's no one size fits all answer to that. We can say generally a weekly newsletter is good for most people. Weekly is a good interval because it's short enough that people aren't going to forget about you on the one hand, but at the same time, it's long enough that you're not spamming people with a bunch of emails. Um, Depending on industry and depending what your people are looking for, your audience, it may be a little bit different. So, for example, I worked at a company once that was they sold silver and gold. And so they regularly sent like daily and throughout the day update emails based on how the markets were moving. So something like that is very up to the minute. New York Times would be another example. Morning Brew sends daily updates. New York Times, I think, sends multiple. But on the other hand, I know there's some kind of like bigger, B2B consulting things might not do it maybe once a month. It's going to depend on what your audience wants. But by and large, for most people, I think a week is a good interval. Um, I feel like that's kind of the way that the industry's gone. But the main thing that matters the most is to be consistent, because if you're not consistent, your audience doesn't have an expectation of when they're going to hear from you. So it doesn't necessarily matter as much what period you choose, weekly, monthly, daily, whatever. Just make sure you stick to it, because if you don't do that, um, marketing in a lot of ways is about setting up expectation and then fulfilling that expectation. And if you don't do that with your emails, there's not much of a point in sending them anyway. It's a shotgun approach as opposed to a laser. So that's how often should you send emails? Again, it kind of depends. And you should test this if you feel like it's not working the way that you think it should. Another one we got a lot of is how long should your content be? So this is another one that's relatively dependent on industry, but there's some good averages. I'll drop a link or two in here. I've got one from Aweber. HubSpot also has one. But Aweber, this is a really good piece that talks about the length of an email. And this particular one that they have is they pulled from top marketers, 1,000 emails from 100 top marketers, people who see really high open rates, really high click-throughs. And of the 1,000 emails that they looked at, let me just show you this article because it's quite worth it. There we go. Okay. So on average, they say it's about 434, and these are the top ones. This is not like the broader average. This is people who are doing good email. It's 3 minutes to read. But it really does depend. They talk about shorter emails. Some of the other sources I've seen actually say that right now we are seeing a little bit of a move back to shorter emails, um, which can be useful in specific circumstances, especially if you know you have a prospect on the hook and you're just giving them something short and sweet. Sometimes I've seen as short as 2 or 3 sentences an email: intro, 2, 3 sentences, call to action link, and done. For newsletters, you know, uh, more content update type emails, yeah, that probably 200 to 400 words is a good sweet spot. We're talking a couple paragraphs there, a few paragraphs. But it really depends. Ann Handley, who's a very good marketer, she sends emails that take on average like 15 minutes to read. It's long enough that I think some of them actually get cut off by Google. Um, but her audience are readers, and there's value there for them. So the real question here isn't necessarily how long should an email be. The question is what is the best length? Where will my audience get the most value from this? So if you've given them that value in 3 sentences, you're good. You're done. If, like Ann Handley, there's value in them reading all the way through, something that's 3 or 4 screens, they'll stick with it. So figure out what your audience wants and provide them that value. But on average, a few paragraphs is good. Alrighty. We also got several people asking, what type of content should we use? Again, this is very audience dependent. If you're talking a newsletter or something that you're sending every week, where it's something that's a little more evergreen, I think of like our dispatch, our Rainmaker dispatch emails. We're sending, here's an article about an aspect of content marketing. It's not necessarily time sensitive most of the time. Excuse me. It's something that has longer term value. So for newsletter type stuff, where you're sending like weekly sort of emails, that I think the dispatch is a good template. Another one, so I'm a big basketball fan. I actually ran a basketball newsletter for a little while, sort of doing link aggregation from across the internet of what the greater basketball discourse was. And that also went once a week, and that was just link aggregation. I did a little bit of writing on it, but for the most part, it was a list of links, reasons why you would want to read them, just broken down into sections. And people loved it. There's another guy who does the same thing, and he and I were both doing it. And I pulled from his stuff, he pulled from mine, and it was the same link aggregation. And that had value for that audience. You could do, because our audience was diehard fans of the NBA who wanted to read everything about it every single week. And so we didn't have to go into great detail explaining every link. All we had to do is just say, here's the list of links, we're good to go. So that had value for them. As far as other types of content, you've got link sharing, you've got like articles, you've got news. If you're an organization that really, say a church or like Boy Scouts of America or something like that, or like a local chapter of the American Advertising Federation, you'd probably be wanting to put out like regular news update emails too. Here's what our members are doing, here's what's coming up, that sort of thing. Chambers of Commerce is another one. And then, maybe how-tos, if you're, I have a friend who runs a bar supply store. I'm trying to get her to do content marketing. And there's a whole lot of utility for her in like every week. Hey, here's how you make this cocktail ingredient. Here's how you make this cocktail. Here's how you use this bar tool. That sort of stuff would have incredible value for her audience. So again, it kind of comes back to the audience, but those are a few ideas of things that you can do just dependent on industry. Link sharing, kind of newsy articles, how-to articles, analysis articles, essays, just depends. What does your audience want? And don't limit yourself to just one type of content. We do multiple, like we do link shares, we do how-tos, we do regular like articles and things. You may have different periods between those two, and they may go to different verticals. But don't limit yourself to just one type of content. You can send more than one. Okay, we got one from Fred here. Actually, there's a couple from Fred and Peter that kind of touch on some of the same points. So Fred talks about a newsletter, posting his newsletter on the site versus sending an email that introduces or paraphrases the articles. And Peter asked if we recommended sending a short email with just intro text and a hyperlink, or whether the email should include most of the content. So I think we can kind of lump a lot of this together. I don't think if it's a newsletter being posted on the site, and I know Fred's site. To explain for those who might not know Fred's site, which is everybody, he gets contributors from a lot of different places. There's a ton of content that goes up every week, and the newsletter is an aggregation of that. So posting the newsletter on the site, when it's basically just a list of the things that are being aggregated, it's like, hey, these podcasts were released this week. This articles released this week. I don't think that has utility. If the newsletter is a unique piece of content on its own, yes, it should live on your site. If the primary purpose of the newsletter is to act as a setting for the other content that you have, no, it should not live on your site. And if you wanted to send a short email that just has intro text and a hyperlink, I think that's perfectly fine. It's going to depend on what your audience wants. Again, not to be a broken record about that, but a lot of this really is very specific. We can make broad judgments on it across the industry and draw like broad conclusions, but if in different niches, it's going to be a little different. So yeah, intro text and a hyperlink. If you just say like, hey, here's what this is about, you want to read it, click here, that can work. In fact, we do that here at Rainmaker Digital Services. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It kind of depends. You can look at the back end of your site. You can look at the hits on your page through Google Analytics, and through that you could figure out basically how many people are clicking through to it. And then you could look at you could A/B test. You could send one where it was just a short paragraph in the link, and then send another one that it's the whole body copy of the post that you would be doing. And then do that, depending on the size of your list. If it's under 1,000, probably 5 to 10 times. I don't remember exactly what we said in the last article, but if your sample size is bigger than 1,000, you'll have to run it less because you have more data to work from. But yeah, go ahead and A/B test like your short paragraph and your little your little link and the long piece, and see whether there's a difference between the click-through rate and people actually reading the page, or the open rate on the email. You can get a good approximation of whether it's working or not. All right. Let's see. There's another one from Fred here. It says, for a newsletter that is listing what's new on the site each week, plus a promotion or course or book or something similar, how much personal should be included? That's a really interesting question, because I feel like there was a period in content marketing where because everything was so fresh and so new, the blogosphere was this kind of budding thing, and everybody sort of wanted to know their content creators on a much more personal basis. there's a difference between personal and I guess parasocial. I don't know if I'm using the word correctly, but I feel like now the focus is broadened to the point where people don't necessarily want to know, hey, I got up this morning, I walked my dog, and then I came back to the house and I brewed a cup of coffee, and then I sat down to write this email about email marketing. These days, I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily want to know all that. They just want to say, like, hey, if it's relevant to the story, keep it in. If not, keep it out, because our inboxes are overflowing. Average person, uh, I don't have the study right here at hand, but going from memory, I believe it's roughly 200 just business emails a day that people get. That's a pretty crowded inbox. And so you're going against, I mean, like, you remember when you went to the mailbox and you opened the mailbox and it was stuffed full of junk mail. And that was only like 20, 30 envelopes, probably. Like, email is junk or spam on a level that is only possible with digital. And so people have a little less patience for that sort of meandering around to get to the thing. Um, if you have a very personal brand, people might appreciate that. If it's very much like you're a poet telling a story about how you got the inspiration for this thing, great. you know but for most brands, I feel like if you have a little bit of something personal at the front, one or two sentences, that's probably fine. We do it with our monthly, our monthly dispatch. We do a little bit. It's not even usually that personal, though. It relates to business. You want to go a little longer, save it for your friends. Your audience doesn't have the patience for it usually. And then got another one here. It says, this is a specific Rainmaker platform question. So is there a way in Rainmaker platform to track click-through so the site knows who the user is and can use some method to tailor the content they see? That's an interesting one. Right now, um, it hasn't really been something that we've had to include to this point. It is something we're talking about moving forward. We've done it in some custom implementations on Rainmaker platform, but it's not built into um, the main platform. The bigger conversation about this, though, is you're talking about tracking click through. This is a very smart question because with GDPR and a lot of the legislation that's happening in online privacy, what we're seeing is a move to first party data instead of third party data. And let me explain what I mean by that. First party data is data that you collect yourself through your channels. Third party data is data that's collected through other channels. So you're talking Google Analytics, you're talking Facebook, you're talking any of the major advertising PPC networks, that sort of thing. And this data is then sold to people to use. This is part of the reason GA4 is so radically different from Universal Analytics, Google Analytics 4 and Universal Analytics, because they had to change the way that they measure things. And as a result, you can't get as granular about some of these things as you could before because it's just not legal. Some would argue it's not even ethical. That's a bigger conversation. You want to go down that road, you can. But first party data that you collect yourself about your own audience is going to be super critical moving forward because you can't lean on the staff of Google and Facebook to do the work for you anymore. You have to get people interested enough in your content and what you have to say that they'll give you access to them. Membership in a site, um, tiered memberships and things, which are all things that Rainmaker platform supports. Um, you know, you can't just rely on the third party cookie. So the answer to that question is we don't currently have a way to track that click through that way. You can see it obliquely through Google Analytics a little bit, but by and large, if that's a particular thing that we need, we can talk custom implementations. Um, and we've been having conversations about it because we believe that first party data is important moving forward. So yes. Um, let's see. Do we have any other questions here? Feel free to chime in. I'm sitting here talking a lot. I know I'm the one that's got the camera, but if there's anything that I've said that's kind of sparked a thought or gotten some interest here, if y'all are trying to figure out anything related to your own email marketing, uh, drop it in the chat. Let me know. And in the meantime, I'll also share, some of the. I spend a lot of time reading about email marketing, reading about content marketing in general. I'm going to drop a few good links in here for y'all if you want to dig into either average statistics across the industry or much more narrow niche statistics. So we sent a state of the platform recently that actually lent on this get response piece pretty heavily, talking about email personalization and whether it mattered or not and whether it actually works or not. And get responses data indicates that that's actually changing, that personalization is not working the same way that it used to across a broad spectrum. So that's a real interesting piece there. And they've got a ton of other data. MailChimp regularly checks their user base. The last time they updated this is in 2019, but the data is still decent. Constant Contact has a lot of good data about open rates and click-through rates. And I believe that one's actually broken down by industry. Aweber, I already included that link. That talks a lot about the average email length, and that was specific to good marketers. HubSpot, as HubSpot usually does, HubSpot's really good about coding a bunch of stuff from different places and just throwing it in a huge goal. Some of their sources, I'm going to drop this link in here because it does talk about the length of emails, but some of their sources are a little older. They lean on a Boomerang study from 2016 that, 2016 is an eternity in content marketing. So take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, so those are just a few good sources if you want to read more. You can also, rainmakerdigital.com. I'm going to put in the plug for it because /articles. And, if you want to read more on this, we do write about email marketing regularly. Like I said, I just did a state of the platform talking about personalization, using short codes, first name, last name, whether that actually matters. We talk about email length, whether or not you should, where your CTA should be, how long a subject line should be. There's a lot of data on there. If you go to here, let me just do the full length. And I'll share my screen here for this. I got to get one good plug in. There we go. All right. So if you go to rainmakerdigital.com/digital marketing and just scroll down email marketing for everyone else. We've got some stuff about how to do email CTAs, proper length, personalization, permission, why permission really matters for your emails, autoresponders. And if you have specific questions about things, feel free to reach out. We'll talk to you. We can share some content that can help you if you have questions, whether it's ours or somebody else's. There's some specifics of things that we're experts, but there's people who are specialists in things, and we got no problem talking about their stuff too. So yeah. If nobody else has any questions to go over right now, um, I might go ahead and end it here. Appreciate y'all showing up. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for um, being here, and for those of you who are watching later, thanks for signing up and showing the interest. We hope to do more of these, and we appreciate you coming by. So have a good one. Bye now.